Good afternoon and welcome to the Beaufort County Board of Education meeting of the Ad Hoc Results Committee. It is April 4th, 2022, and we have present the committee members, Melvin Campbell, Kathy Robine, and myself, and then we have the administrative liaison, Daniel Fallon, with us, and other board members joining us are David Stribinger. So we will now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. We need a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda of the Ad Hoc Results Committee, April 4th.
Thank you.
Motion.
And Mr. Mel Campbell, so Kathy Robine made the motion, Mr. Mel Campbell seconded the motion. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved unanimously. Next up is public comments.
We don't have any.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the approval of the July 21st, 2021 committee meeting minutes. And I've forgotten what we've done when we've had this issue because we only have one of the three members on the committee now.
Well,
Yeah.
I move that we approve the committee meeting minutes from the, let's see what date that was, from the July 21st, 2021 meeting.
All right, I'll second it. And I'll just ask you, Kathy, since I was not a member and neither was Mel at that time. So you as the chair feel these minutes are accurate?
I do, yeah, yes.
Any further debate or discussion? There being none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, the minutes are approved unanimously. So next up is to review the current results section and discuss possible changes. So it might be best, Robin, to display, before displaying that, let's just display the summary that Kathy has it, that Kathy wrote up that we have in the documents today, because this kind of covers what happened last year.
Actually, I think it was Ingrid who wrote it up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Thank you, Kathy, for that correction.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I sort of figured that actually from the committee meeting minutes. Yeah. All right. So I'll just give, I'm not going to read these again, but just give everybody a few minutes or a minute or two here just to read through these.
Well, can you see it? Is it big enough?
Yeah, I read it already, yes.
Okay,
But
okay.
I can't see that. No. I think you sent it out in the email.
Okay, good.
It was in the board docs earlier.
Yes.
So I think probably the most important points from this are, the board by approval, that is by vote, adjusted the evaluation rubric that was used to evaluate our superintendent's performance for the 2020-2021 school year. And the rubric was changed because of the pandemic. It made it very difficult to capture some of the, I should say, items or areas, including, academic performance, teacher retention, and financial oversight. And so in those categories, as the last bullet points out, the evaluation tool was adjusted and replaced with a pandemic-related question in each of the assessment categories. And so when we did Dr. Rodriguez's evaluation last fall, there were now 37 questions in the 5 components of professional practice. As compared to the prior year, there were 32 questions in the 5 components of professional practice. So we need to decide what we think is appropriate going forward, and then make that recommendation to the board, who ultimately will vote and approve or disapprove of our recommendations. So one thing I noticed in the policy results section of our board governance, which is pages 71 to 76, it specifically says that each year the board will review the results and calibrate the desired outcomes for the next 2-year period. And to assure that expectations are realistic, the expectations will be agreed upon, or it says will be agreed to by the superintendent as attainable. So my question, and I think Kathy could answer this easily, are we currently working on the metrics for this school year? Or are we working on them for next school year?
For this current school year.
Yeah, that's exactly
the results don't, but we don't get the results of those metrics until, the fall.
Exactly. Okay.
But it should be, this school year.
Correct. Okay. So that just seems a little, maybe David has an explanation for that, why it says that we're calibrating it for the next 2-year period in the results section.
Yeah, David can explain it. We did have a reason for that. Go ahead, David.
Yes, David. Thank you.
I can't remember why we made it 2 years, but
I remember. Yeah,
good.
I remember. It was because the metrics changed after the first year. We changed the percentages of how we would, how we have the like, if it's -2, if it's 200, then it's ineffective. If it's, we changed those for the second year. That's why we were saying 2 years. You remember, David, when we did that, we projected out, and maybe Daniel can speak to that too, I think.
Well, I think you're right. The first year we said this is our baseline. So the first year we just had to not lose any ground from the previous year.
That's right.
And then the second year we figured there would be some traction to making gains. And so that's why we had 2 years.
That's right.
It's always good, I think, to have 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because you want steady improvement. And once, these results have a percentage of improvement expected. And I'm not sure that would change. I think that those percentages probably stay the same as you creep toward your goal. But I think 2 years is the way to go. But as I said, the first year is the baseline. And now when we're sitting here today, we're probably back in the baseline year.
Yes. Yeah.
2 years were useless because we had no metrics. So it seems like we're again sitting in a baseline year, which means that the results were to not lose ground over the last year. And the last year that we had metrics, I think, was 3 years ago.
So I concur, David, with your thinking of the 2 years and to try to continue to have improvement as opposed to doing it 1 year at a time. I just wanted to be sure we were evaluating doing the matrix for this current school year, so we have everybody on the same page. We're all working on the same document. So I would love, yes, go ahead, Robin.
I put up, if you all can see in board docs, on the screen,
Yeah.
this was the copy of the metrics that we did in 2019 and 2020. So you all had 2019, 19 to 20, and then the next year was 2021. And that's what was proposed.
Right.
Exactly. So,
I
Dan,
thought,
can you recap for us? Now, I thought that we did get some metrics last, let's say, fall, showing that students learn. I mean, there was learning loss. I remember thinking myself that I thought there would likely have been more learning loss, and I'm, certainly it was variable among each student. But what metric did we have last fall, and what will we have this year?
Yeah, so kind of to recap, I know it was mentioned, we worked on those initials, I think in the 2018-19 school year, thinking we were going to the 2020 metrics, and 2020 never happened. So I think, when we're in a baseline, I think we are getting a baseline, but then we never got the second year to know if the baseline was even close, because 2020 is when, we didn't have any spring testing. So we lost that, and then we come back 2021. We did offer state assessments, but there was no requirement for a family to come off of virtual to come in for testing. So there was no impetus to say, we need everyone to come in. We broadcast, we said nicely, hey, we'll have, perfectly safe locations for your students to come in if they wish to assess, but we were nowhere near the 95% that's required for testing, no matter what we did. And that's across the state as well. So yes, while we didn't see as much learning loss as I think as we would have expected, we also didn't have a full subset of the whole battery of everyone testing to actually know that. So we did the best we could. We tried to get every student in. We did pretty well, but I will admit, not everyone came in. Not everyone felt safe. Totally understandable. So I'm not sure if we really even have two sets of data yet to even measure that first year. Unfortunately, we do have everything that would be included if we wanted to go back and look at bringing student achievement scores back in, if that's an area that we want to entertain, or if we want to look more towards the policy procedure type side, so we don't end up in this situation again of not having data. Either one, but this spring will be the first spring that we've got everybody back with a full expectation of accountability and a full expectation of assessments.
Melvin's
Thank you.
hand. Okay.
Yeah, I see. So next is Melvin.
yeah, I thought the baseline, we introduced the baseline early because of Dr. Rodriguez's first year, and we didn't want to give him an unfair advantage, or disadvantage. So we relied the baseline to the first year to be the baseline set. And I thought that was strictly because of Dr. Rodriguez, not because of an assessment style or anything else. And since we haven't gotten any data since then that would really be relevant, can we go back to that original set of data as baseline and compare that set with where we are this spring, and then set some type of rubric for the next year? That would be my take on all of the things that you've said so far. I mean, we don't have a baseline, but establishing a baseline from this year's set of data with, and how it compares to the original year, 2018, 2019, is, I think it's something that we need to look at. Is this year's data, set of data, and Daniel probably can help us. Is it better or worse than it was during Dr. Rodriguez's first year? And will he have an unfair advantage if we set it to this year? With the pandemic having an effect, or would it be very compatible and it wouldn't matter? But I want to, have some type of way to show continued improvement.
Right.
And we missed that boat 2 years ago when we didn't set an in-house set of data. We didn't do anything in-house. We relied on the state. Am I clear with what I'm saying, or am I out in left field?
No, I think you said it well. And I thank you for your comment. So Kathy?
So my comment is, I definitely feel the need for the data. And even though we didn't have close to 95% in the 2021, I think that should be our new baseline, because that data reflects the pandemic and the instruction that was missed. And I think that's probably more realistic than going to our 2019 data. I would say that baseline, that is the new baseline, because that reflects the impacts of the pandemic on the kids that came in and took it. So I guess it could mean that did only the top students come in and take it and the other kids didn't? I guess that could be an issue. But that's my thought.
All right, thank you, Kathy. That was one of the things I thought of as well, is as Daniel pointed out, they certainly had nowhere near the 95% requirement for the testing, and it was optional. Are you self-selecting your better students that are coming in? Probably you are, is my guess, but I'm not a statistician and don't really know. But typically, people that are doing poorly aren't going to want to show that on a test. David?
Thanks. I agree with Mel completely. I think the last 2 years data is just so contaminated that it just wouldn't be right to use it. It's just not good data. The last year of good data, as Mel pointed out, was 18-19. So I don't see any problem comparing this year with that year, because you have to throw out the 2 pandemic years. I mean, there's just nothing about those years is valid. So I agree with Mel. 18-19 is still the baseline, and this year is what was the first year, and I think the first year was no regression.
Right.
Right. So I think that's the way we need to approach it, just to be statistically valid. And certainly Daniel's much better in stats than I am, but just seems there are so many contaminants to the last 2 years that you wouldn't want to use it.
So, Daniel, I'd love to hear, having heard what Mel and David said and what Kathy said, I think my initial thoughts were, just go to last year, but I think to the spring of 2021, that data. But I hesitate with that now too, because first of all, that didn't even have most of your students, the 95%. I think that's a real issue. I think we need to have, he's going to be judged now again by 95% of the students taking it. So I think the baseline certainly should reflect that same group of students. In other words, most students taking it. That's just what's come to my mind in our discussion. So Daniel, I'd love to hear you weigh in and make any comments you think are appropriate.
I think one comment is I definitely say 21-22 is still a pandemic year. To say this data is not tainted again, I think concerns me a little bit when I'm looking at the learning that was occurring. We didn't have a virtual year. We didn't have ending of a year or beginning of a year full virtual, but we had numerous cases of quarantines and positive students and positive teachers and quarantine students. So to say, while we didn't go virtual, and that's a celebration in itself, to say that we didn't have to close or didn't have to do that was tremendous. But I do know, just through the weekly reporting of the COVID for DHEC purposes out of our shop as well, the month of the end of December and then January and February were astronomical on the positive cases in the quarantine. So this year's COVID impacted as well. To compare that to 2019, coming out of 2 years of interrupted learning, and the data is not going to be there. Just as a researcher, just as a pragmatist, the achievement's not going to be there as it was in 2019. There's been severe impact on the learning. That's just from our formative assessments and what we're seeing day to day. Comparing it to 2019 would be very, very difficult, and it would require, honestly, to be able to measure any kind of impact or a causation to the data. You'd have to look at all the other districts to see if their 2019 was, at what point was their 2019 statistically higher than their 2022. And I'm just going off of, what I see in the day-to-day interims and whatnot. Don't have hard, fast data in front of me, but I would not bank on there being that many instances of seeing progression based to the 2019 baseline here, or very many places across the state. And then if I were to do that type of work, looking at just, following the news blasts and whatnot across the state, how many districts still, have virtual Fridays, or we're closed for a month or 2 months just around us, 3 or 4 weeks because of COVID outbreaks at schools. I think it would be hard for me to find a comparable district that could hang its hat on not closing at all, and then try to extrapolate whether or not that was a beneficial. That's getting to a really, really complex evaluation for that metric. And unfortunately, it comes into having the hard, fast data and having some sort of baseline. It's landed us here with a pandemic that really messed up what I thought was a pretty decent model. And then we haven't had to have a second assessment since that we could really rely on.
So, thank you, Daniel. So from your comments, would you, to me, I'm making a false assumption. It sounds like you would almost make this year now, the testing that's done this spring, as the baseline. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
If we were to go with having hard, fast assessment data as part of the evaluation, this year would still be a tainted baseline, but it would be more of a realistic baseline than 2019. With no pandemic, with no interrupted learning. That's if we want to put that level of measure to a hard, fast score of a student, basically, instead of possibly looking at something that removes this variability of having or not having a score associated with it, and on a yearly cycle having to have this conversation. So yeah.
And can I ask you one other question, then I'll call on Mel. So you mentioned that back in it was last spring of 2021, that, not nowhere near 95% of the students, since it was optional, came in for testing. Can you just give a ballpark? Was it 50%? It was 25%?
No, I think we were in the upper 80s.
Okay.
Depending on the grade, and whatnot. Yeah. We had really decent turnout for basically saying our doors are open, come take the assessment if you would like to. Now, if you're in school, we're going to administer the assessment. That's state law, but yeah, we had, it was in the upper 80s. I want to say it was right around 89%. So it was not horrific in any way.
Yeah. All right.
But across the state, I think they were coming close to like 85%. So some of us districts carried that, some of them were much lower. Not horrifically off of the 95% testing rule, but just to kind of share that assessment and that percentage participation.
And I'm sorry, what was the participation statewide, or
I'd have to look that up exactly. I'd have to go out and pull it, but there were districts that were very, very, very low. I think they were getting close to the 85 across the state, I believe it was. So yeah.
Thank you. Melvin?
Yeah, so it's a bunch of thoughts, Daniel. I I agree that, we could start this year and have this be the baseline, but I think we need to look at what really happened, and assessing what really happened is a big part of what we can find out. I don't see that as a fair assessment for Dr. Rodriguez in terms of growth and anticipation of growth as we had prescribed it. But I think we do need to look at it from the standpoint of what happened from 18, 19 to perhaps what happened now that you mentioned that you had such a large percentage there. What happened last year and to what happened from last year to this year. Even you're comparing that 85 percent versus the 95 that we got gonna get results from this year, and look at all of those movements to determine a fair way of assessing where we go from here, because it'll still be based on the results of the pandemic and the effect of the pandemic in terms of what can we anticipate for proper growth now, and all of those things are that's going to be the fair assessment of what Dr. Rodriguez is doing compared to across the country growth. So we do need to perhaps find some corresponding counties or school districts somewhere that had kind of the same demo and statistical differences that we have had over the last year. I mean, we did not close this year, so there got to be some schools close to that. And what did they do? And I'm not anticipating they did significantly worse than we did or significantly better than we did. But I think we need to look at that and come up with some hard facts on what really happened, so we can fairly rewrite the policy if we have to, So I don't think it's as simple as, and I think you agree with that, as creating a baseline and say, let's go. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mel. So, Kathy, do you want to weigh in as a committee member?
Well, I'm just, the only other way to, I have a couple thoughts.
Okay.
I would like to see the data dropped in from the 21 school year, dropped into our matrix and see what that looks like. And then, even though it isn't, but then, then maybe we reevaluate our matrix in terms of how we're defining ineffective, minimally effective, and effective. Perhaps if we remember, we were expecting a big learning loss, right? That's what everyone was, and we saw a loss. And perhaps it wasn't as great because not everyone was tested. So, I think that, I don't know, before I would suggest that we look at the percentages for the matrix in terms of what's effective, I'd like to see that data from last year dropped in and compared to the 2018, 2019, to what was our original baseline. At least I would feel like we'd have a little bit more information to go on. It would give us a little bit more data. We look at that and then say, okay, so maybe really effective is that the students didn't lose, lost less, maybe still had some loss, but not as much. I don't know. And then my other thought is, maybe for a year, for the next, we use this as our baseline, but for, in terms of Dr. Rodriguez's evaluation for this coming year, that's the problem. We can't, if we just looked at map data, but that, I was thinking spring and fall, but, we're gonna, and that's what this is for the elementary kids anyway, so never mind that. That wasn't thought out well enough.
All right. Thank you, Kathy. I'll let Earl speak.
Yes. Daniel, you said about 80% had tested last year.
We had, the state had around 85%.
Okay. What do we have?
Yeah, we were in the upper 80s,
Upper 80.
88, 89%.
Okay. Will we receive any data from the state before October?
Report cards come out October 1. That's under the federal law. We'll get all of our information. It will be embargoed through a certain day and time. I
Okay.
don't know that date yet. I will get most of the data sometime in July. I will not be able to share it until that embargo release, depending on what the state does and how the state's going to use it. In the past, they would do a rolling embargo. So as soon as they felt all the data was back, secured, and reviewed, they would move through the pipeline of that data release. Usually it would come out prior to the release of the report cards, so the report cards weren't some surprise to anyone. But in the last year's model, could have been a hangover of the pandemic and everything being delayed. Everything came out public on October 1. So if I had to go off of history of what happened last year, I would not look for any public release of information prior to that October 1 day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Earl, and thank you, Daniel. So I think, the big problem here is we've never, experienced this, the school district, the children, the teachers, with having a pandemic and how it affects learning. So I think your idea, Kathy, is good, is to, I think if you make a motion or Mel does, to, fill our, let's come back with the information to the committee, what was, it was 18-19 was the last regular year, correct?
Right.
Non-pandemic year.
Yes.
And then put in the results that we had from last spring, although, it was in the high 80s numbers, the percentage of students that took it. I think at least we'll then, I don't know, hopefully get a better handle on, exactly where should we be headed? What is reasonable? I feel like I don't have a good handle on it.
Yeah.
Mel.
Yeah, and my comment is also that, this year should show an improvement over last year. But what happened between 18-19 and last year, we need to know.
Right.
Also, and I don't know, I think this year was a little bit better than last year in terms of what instruction, live instruction, absentees because of the quarantines and other things. I think the statistics was a little bit better than last year. So you would anticipate something close to even or better than last year. But I'm not saying we should judge anything on that. I think we need to look at it and see what's happening before we, decide what the baseline should be. That's all I'm saying.
So there's a couple other hands up. So before we make our motion, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Kemp, my question was also in terms of what he just said, Mr. Kemp said too, also, in terms of what are results from this year should go on into it as well. But also, one of my things were, too, was how are we going to digest the meat that we get from this year going into last year in terms of coming up with being precise in areas that we're looking at, in terms of how we factor those different areas into how we will evaluate him as well.
Well, that's just to respond. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out, is how to fairly evaluate the superintendent. And we're just talking right now about student achievement.
Right, but in terms of student achievement, what my question is, what will be the things that what will be the meat that what will be the things that, in terms of the meat that we will evaluate him on, and what all are we allowing to be brought up this year, coming out of the pandemic that we didn't in prior years. Or better yet, another question to flip it: in prior years, prior to post pandemic, what was the meat that we were evaluating the superintendent on back then versus what are we evaluating him now?
I can answer that.
Kathy.
Well, this is prior to that, William. The Dr. Rodriguez wasn't here, and the instrument that we designed and the board approved was the meat, and that was the test scores. And it was very comprehensive on measuring achievement through standardized test scores, end of course tests, MAP testing for the kids that took that. So that's the meat of it. And that's what we're trying to figure out now, how to, we had a very meaty instrument, I feel, very specific in terms of how we were going to evaluate the superintendent in terms of student achievement and student growth. And then the pandemic hit. So now we're looking at how we take into, put it back in, so there's some accountability there for student achievement, but recognizing that student achievement has taken a big impact over the last 2 years. So that's what we're trying to figure out now. So by, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Can I chime in now too? I mean, I see.
Go ahead, Mel.
But yeah, Kathy, we're basically looking at a basic set of information that we had, and it was affected. It was affected over the last 2 years, and first we need to look at it to see how it was affected, and then after looking at it to see how it affected our children, how did it affect other children, to see whether or not we're worse off or better off than most districts, and then we can judge on basically what kind of job the superintendent did do in terms of that. That's my way of analyzing where we are. Unless we can look and see what happened to us, and then look and see what happened to others, we can't judge on whether or not how better off we are, relatively speaking. So that's my take, and that's the kind of process I'm going to support.
All right, David.
Yeah, I think the approach that y'all are coming to is exactly what you need to do. You need to calibrate the learning loss instead of us, just trying to guess at it or what we think. Calibrate it by comparing this year to 18-19 and look at it. Okay, there you go. It's measurable then. And then you can go from there, because the superintendent's mission has changed somewhat from student achievement to recouping that learning loss, which is also student achievement, but it's a different view. His job has been, make up for that learning loss as quickly as possible. So you can't do any of that until you calibrate on all those. And Kathy's right, there's very comprehensive metrics that Daniel worked on and got for us. So if you do that comparison this year versus 18-19, you'll have a detailed map of the learning loss. and it'll be by ethnic group and everything else. So I think you're exactly on the right track.
Daniel? Thank you, David.
Yeah, I just wanted to share some thoughts kind of as I'm hearing the conversation happen. Not sure I'm going to be able to compare to other like students at any level, and 100% cannot do for MAP. That's a nationally normed assessment. Once the new norms come out, and I guess it would be 2023, depending on if they're delaying with the pandemic, I'll know how a normed student or an average student is doing in their data set. But I have there's no published MAP data from other districts or other states or even other schools. So that one whole tab of the 5-tab system would be gone. I could not do that. I could not calibrate that at all. And I think it's going to be hard to calibrate the others simply because it's going to take an analysis of were they closed, how long were they closed, what was their COVID numbers looking like. I think that's a slippery slope. Now to recalibrate to ourselves is most definitely doable. We have some control over that if we wanted to do that. But I'm not going to be able to safely or with any level of validity give you was our loss better or worse than another without a pretty extensive research study to know days closed, what was their average missing, all that for students to be able to say, was it a superintendent decision? Was it a leadership? Was it a school? Or was it baseline border? They were closed because of the pandemic. So that one's going to be, if not difficult, close to impossible with any level of time frame and not, basically stagnating any work that I'm doing just to answer that question. But would calibration be possible to ourselves? Yes. I just can't calibrate that, I don't believe, without doing a pretty extensive research project anywhere else besides the border of Beaufort County.
So can I ask you a question, Daniel? Can you, I understand completely what you just said. Would you be able to, instead of trying to compare us to, districts, et cetera, and it seems like a whole lot of factors would play in, like you said, how long was the school closed? Were they virtual? How many days did they have in the classroom? All that kind of stuff. Would it be easy to just say, here's the state average for these categories and just do a state average, or what do you think of that?
Well, it's going to be close. When we give this to others or even ourselves, when we look at that, we can do a pretty close estimate of what that would be. We have to go off of the state files, and we basically have to re-average averages. And I know mathematically we don't average averages, so we unweight the average, and then we look at the end count again. So we then do a whole new average off of the end counts. It should not be an issue at the state level. Because the state has more than 20 of all of those groups that are reported there, but we would not be able to do that at districts or even schools. We would think you could, but you would be surprised the number of schools in the state of South Carolina that don't have in a grade level 20 of those students. Whether any of the subgroups, you will find zeros, and that would be an incomplete data set. But at the state, at a holistic, just state view, we should be able to. The only question I would have is probably around college and career ready. I don't know that the state releases it at that level. I do believe they do. I'd have to look at that one. But the others, again, not MAP, can't do MAP that way. It would just be to us. But SE ready, EOC, and college and career ready, we could show what that looks like at the state level.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, Mr. Smith.
I do concur with also getting, even though I've heard what I just heard, I do concur with getting different states and different districts around the state and around the country to also measurable. But also one of my questions too is, in doing all of this, one thing that I wonder is it, you know, with Mr. Fallon being a part of the superintendent's cabinet, for him to be giving us some of this data, would that not be a conflict of interest, being that he does work for the superintendent? Should we possibly not get someone from outside of the district to kind of help formulate this as well? Because I know on certain things we would normally go outside the district. Would it not make sense to kind of get someone who's not a part of district staff to do some of that? Have we thought about that?
Would you like me to respond?
I mean, anyone can respond. Yes, man, it doesn't matter.
Well, first of all, yes, the entire senior staff works for or is supervised by the superintendent and works for the board and the community. And I would hope that Daniel, and I think this is likely, absolutely the case. I mean, he's going to be reporting factual material. It's not like he's going to be making things up, or he's going to report numbers, and the numbers are the numbers. I mean, I don't think it's not like, what is the number? It's here's the number. So I don't think it's a gray area. And I think Mr. Fallon is capable and should be the person to do it. And if we were going to go outside the district, that would take board approval and a board vote, and et cetera. It would not be up to this committee to make that decision. Would anybody else like to comment back about that?
I would just concur. I mean, we're not asking Daniel to interpret anything. We're just asking him to drop the data in the matrix that we have. And then we've designed the interpretation. And that's what we were just discussing. Do we need to tweak those parameters for the interpretation? But the data he's pulling from the state, from MAP, and he's just dropping it in. So there's not any, I don't think that,
My comment is, I think I'm concerned that Daniel's telling me he can't do it, and then he said he could do a gross thing from the state. Well, if the state, and that's why we do these assessments, I assume that's why the state has a report card, so we compare ourselves with the districts and the state overall picture. But we've got subsets of school districts that are very similar to ours, and I'm asking you to dig into the deep depths of how many days they were absent or not. That's a part of our evaluation process, because Dr. Rodriguez did decide on the direction we were going in with, and those things was his directives. How many days we were going to close, why we were going to close, what percentage we were going to lie to, how much respect he was going to give to the DHEC numbers, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And sure, different districts made different approaches, but we need to know how that relates and why. And you telling me it can't be done, saying that we're wasting time here, because all we need to do then is look at our data and move from there. And I think it's doing a disservice to Dr. Rodriguez more so than a service, because I think he did a good job, and our numbers gonna fare off well with his decision making. So I think we can, you can tell me what the top 10 numbers were in the state versus our numbers. And, then we can look and ask for why those things happen. But tell me,
Thank you, Mel.
I find that concerning, but overall, if Dr. Waz's suggestion was, let's look at the state number from just the overall state, but look at those little pockets of the state that's gonna bring those numbers way down because they didn't have the resources that we have. So, we're trying to do this, and I believe in the integrity of everyone involved, and we're trying to do this so we can better the results of the future. I mean, Dr. Rodriguez, I think, is in good hands with us in terms of his evaluation.
Thank you, Mel. David?
Yeah, I think it's a mistake to compare us to the state. I think the results we want are what we think, what our improvements should be in Beaufort County. You know, I don't care about the state averages, and I don't care, you know, how we compare to other districts. I don't care about that. I think we should be 5% better than we were last year, or whatever number y'all decide on. You know, I think we should compare ourselves to ourselves and not the rest of the state, because state averages are skewed by Bamberg and other counties which don't have the resources we have. They can't, you know, it's just unfair to compare us to them. If we were going to compare ourselves to anybody, it would be Spartanburg, and, you know, if that's our aspiration. But Frank's job is to make us better, regardless of how the rest of the state goes. We don't care. It's to make us better. So we should be comparing ourselves to ourselves and see, you know, these are the improvements we want. And that eliminates all those other variables. It's just us. It's just us on us. We want to be 2% better. We want to be 5%, whatever it is. We compare ourselves to ourselves.
I think everybody's made some really good points. I think it's time for us to have a motion. Kathy or Mel, would you like to give a motion?
Well, I move that we look at the data, and I've said it already, look at the data from 2018-19, which was our original baseline, and compare it to this year's data as a reading. But I also want to compare it to last year's data, although it was not complete. And then you know, come to a determination of what the baseline should be. Now, that's what I would want a motion. Y'all let me know what your feedback on that. And I want to make a comment about what David said. And I agree that we shouldn't be comparing ourselves with others, but it's hard to define success unless you define it according to other people. So I want to, you know, what do we set? 5%, 10%, 5% regression could be successful if nobody else is doing that. So that those are the relevant things in terms of looking at the numbers. If everybody's failing dramatically and ours is not as dramatic, I want to know that, because that would, you know, define success in my mind. So it'd be a realistic look at it. But yeah, okay, I'll move that we look at 2018-19 as a baseline and then compare it to this year to reestablish baseline to this year's results.
Well,
yeah.
I think I would, so Mel, I think I agree, ultimately that's what we want to do, but I think our immediate assessment that we need to do is look at 2018-19 and drop in the spring of 2021 and have the comparison there, because we're not going to have this year until, remember, as late as October 1st. So if you could just, and I think we're all in agreement with that, so if you could just reword that if you agree with it, or don't.
I agree with it. I'm not personally agree with it, but I don't, so Kathy didn't, I don't know what Kathy thought.
Kathy, what do you think?
Yeah, that's it. That's what I was suggesting, to drop in the data from 2021 to compare it to the 18-19 data, because we're not going to have the 22 data until October, and that's too late.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's too late. So to make a decision about how we're going to evaluate student achievement, or how we're going to hold Dr. Rodriguez accountable for some student achievement growth, we need to, I think we need to look at those, you know, what we have from 2021, and then discuss it further once we see what's there.
All right, so Mel, you want to just word, Robin put up the wording that we need.
Motioning that we look at it, just look at it, because I really, my heart don't feel like we can fairly establish a baseline from that.
So I agree with you. I mean, we need to look at it and see what stands out, because I don't think we
Right.
know what's.
Yeah, let's just move to look at it and see where we are.
Right, exactly. That's the idea, to see where we go next. We need
Okay.
more information, right?
That's my motion, yeah. I move that we look at the 2021 data and compare it to 2018, 2019 to see where we are
Perfect.
and go
Do
from
we have a
there.
second?
I second that,
Okay,
yes.
is there any further discussion with the committee members?
Yes, can I ask a question? Because y'all changed the motion 3 times.
Okay,
So let me tell you what I had down based off of what you said. Motion to look at the data from 2018 to 2019 as a baseline, drop in spring of 2021 to compare this year's data.
well, it wouldn't be this year's, it's not there.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we start from the beginning again with a clear motion? Motion to look at,
Drop in 2021, that's a thought. The idea is we're gonna look at the 2018, 2019 data as baseline and compare it to 2021 data for information. Did you hear me?
yes, I'm typing.
Thank
Motion
you.
to look at the data from 2018-19 as a baseline and compare it to 2020 to 2021 for information.
Yeah.
Correct, and that's going to come back to our committee.
Yes.
Kathy, second that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Any further discussion?
Williams, hands up.
Mr. Smith, it has to be pertinent to the motion on the table.
In terms of the motion on the table, I still think that it possibly should be added. Also, is that we should still be looking at it from different places in terms of the different counties and then different districts, because of the fact that we want our kids to compete internationally and globally. So I think that does impact it does impact where we're going in the results. So I'll just leave that there. We
Okay.
just don't compete and be for county. We compete globally. Thank you.
All right, Mel?
Yeah, I turn my hand down. I don't have any
Okay.
doubt that.
All right, so let's vote, committee members.
We're gonna do that, yeah.
All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
All righty, so we'll get to when our next meeting is shortly, probably a month away. And Daniel, can you bring that to our next meeting?
As long as the meeting's not this week, it should not be an issue.
Okay, yeah, it's going to be like a month away. Okay. All right, so the two other categories that we need to discuss also are this is page 76, if you're following along in the board governance manual, the teacher recruitment and retention and financial oversight categories. So we're kind of, I think, done with the student achievement discussion for this meeting. The financial oversight might be quicker. I think, I'm not going to make a motion, but it seems like a good way to look at the financial oversight is to just go back to what we had in place. However, we didn't have all these extra ESSER funds, et cetera. So that kind of throws a bit of a I don't know, a wrench into that thinking. So
Right.
Mel or Kathy, would you like to comment or make a motion or whatever we should do?
You know what? Aren't our ESSER funds separate funds and they're not in our general operating budget? Right? So if we just apply this to if we keep the ESSER funds out, although the ESSER funds do allow us to do more with our budget.
Exactly.
Because we can substitute. We could add one about effectively using ESSER funds. so that all the money is used, so that we don't leave any on the table. I don't know. I do think we can maintain the bond rating.
Yeah, and the other category is adhere to budget.
Yeah.
And so it seems like there would be a way to, since our budget this year or the next few years includes some ESSER funds, I think we should have some category of ESSER funding in there. And not sure what the rating should, or what we should be rating about the ESSERs, but I think appropriate use and to not be, appropriate use and not wasting money and not leaving money on the table, all those.
Adhering to the guidelines.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Pass down with the funds, because that's the one thing we want to, leave him with as much flexibility as he can have with those funds. But still, he's got to manage it where we don't give it back and we utilize it appropriately. So
right.
Language.
So do you want to? What we could do is think about it. Think it are each of us about what do we think would be best to put in there for categories, but or we could reach out and to
Tanya, maybe.
To
Tanya.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And see what with this,
and Wendy.
Yeah, and the other, and maybe Tanya probably more than Denise, because Denise is kind of more just involved with the grant part.
Yeah, this become a more common thing if as things go on than abnormal. These extra funds and funds to support education, So
exactly, Mel, and we already know it's going to go into, I think it's at least 2024 or 2025. I mean, several years going forward. Yeah.
So if you look at the matrix as it's written right now, ESSER funding, if we add that, regular, highly effective, under budget by 2%. Well, to be highly effective with our ESSER funding, we want it all spent, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we don't want to be under budget. Right. So,
I agree. We want it all spent, but how do we, put that in there?
I know. Well, that's what we have to think about, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's.
We could. So let's. I guess what I would suggest is we think about it and come back with ideas at the next meeting. And I can also reach out to Tanya and ask her what she thinks would be a reasonable line there for for just the ESSER funds.
Yeah.
So if either of you object to that, please make a motion. Otherwise, that will be our plan. We'll have further discussion at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. Mel, you good with that too?
Yeah, come back with the.
Yeah, and come back with your own ideas too. If you have, you come up with something good, that's great. So, so the last category that's also on page 76 in the governance policy manual is the teacher recruitment and retention. And as we know, once again, the pandemic has had an effect on teacher recruitment and retention. So maybe we need to approach this the same way that we are approaching the student achievement and have Alice Walton, give us the numbers for those same years, 18, 19, 20, 21. Let's look at them and then see, okay, how should we, this is kind of what's happened. What's a reasonable way going forward? What do you guys think?
A little, I think a little of that, but somewhere, we got to, how do we figure out those dynamics? I think it's almost impossible. That I agree with Daniel in terms of the whole industry of educating and teacher, retention. That's going to change. That's changing as we speak. And, And we're gonna see that from a board perspective when it comes to the new contracts. So all of that's gotta be, those are matrices that got to be applied, and I don't know, I don't know if we need to do a whole lot with this right now, except what you're suggesting. Get the information from Alice and see if we can find out where the trend is, what's happening.
Okay.
And, because our goal is going to be how we're going to improve that. And we got things in place that we're trying to do,
Right.
including teacher salary and other
Right.
things. But that's as much as we can go and fairly assess, Dr. Rodriguez on what he's doing in this.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think even no matter what the numbers are,
Right.
I guess we still want to, we would consider if the vacancies increase by greater than 5%, we don't like that. That would still, and if they decrease by 10%, that's good, and we would still call that highly effective in terms of recruitment and retention.
Mhm.
Yeah, but those numbers probably not going to show that kind of stuff, Kathy, that we anticipated. So we didn't anticipate the pandemic.
That's right. No, I know. But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if you start with a new baseline, the pandemic baseline, but what happened, or the trend, the pandemic trends,
That's what we're going to find out with
Yeah, right.
Tina's, suggestion.
Right.
What that trend looked like and what really is happening, and then now what can we anticipate
Yeah.
going
Exactly.
forward?
Yeah.
So I think that's a good move, Tina.
Plan. Okay.
Yeah.
So if there are no objections, I will, or there's no motion to disagree with our thinking, I'll do the same thing. I'll reach out to Alice
Yeah.
and see if she can
Yeah.
provide us that information for the next meeting.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we have William again.
Mr.
Yeah.
Smith's hands up. Okay.
Mr. Smith?
I also think that there are some different things that go with that as well in terms of the culture. I mean, the climate, the climate of the district. Even during the pandemic, plus post pandemic, and I even think that prior to the pandemic, that we should get numbers prior to that as well, because I think all that will play a major factor in making some of those decisions as well. And I definitely think that the climate of the district is something that at some point has to be brought into questioning of in terms of retaining great teachers, because it's definitely been brought to all of our attention. So I just think that that's something that we can no longer, as a district, if we want to do better, then we can no longer ignore that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Robin, can we go back to the agenda, please?
Well, actually, could I have a response to that? Is that something that could be brought up as well?
Well, the response is we're going off the results rubric for evaluation, and the board voted and approved this rubric, and so that's what we're working from. I don't see on page 76 of the board governance policy manual, I don't see under the teacher recruitment and retention section, the rating section, and this is just very limited at the current time. I don't see anything about the school district culture. It's not on there. It's primarily about it's reduce teacher vacancies and reduce the number of short-term substitute days.
And again, if I can,
Yes.
we were looking at metrics that had that had definitive measures that we could put numbers to. So that's why we did that. I think the climate is something that is addressed in C, staff relations. And that is, there are
Mhm.
7 things in there that would reflect that. You know, if that's, but they're reflected in there, and if they're not, then we would have to maybe add something there perhaps, but we were trying to stick with measurable things that that could be measured with numbers. So.
Well, I do believe that the climate is something within its own domain, climate of the district, and I believe that is a big part of it. So I believe that that's something that I understand they may be under different things, but I think climate is one area that needs to be addressed within itself, because that will make the world of difference in terms of people wanting to work, because you know we can do up. That's here or there, but basically, I think climate is one that is a different area within it. Is what I gather. So I mean, I feel about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, William. Mr. Stribinger?
Thank you. I agree with Kathy. Recruitment and retention is a measure of your climate. It's something you can measure. So that's why it's in there. If your climate's bad, you're going to have bad numbers in recruitment and retention. And you can measure that. Doing surveys on climates doesn't tell you as much as that number. If teachers are leaving, you know you have a bad climate. You know, so.
And, you know, certainly the pandemic, there are teachers that left that maybe weren't necessarily, it wasn't a climate issue, but they were close to retirement and didn't want to take the risk of their health, you know, being in the school. So there are a lot of factors, but I think tonight's meeting, I think we accomplished a whole lot and came up with a good plan for our next meeting. So can you put up the agenda, Robin, please?
Tina, can I just bring up one other thing?
Go ahead.
Last time we added the red to each of these, and I would suggest to Daniel's point that we keep those, because this was a year of pandemic as well, and that we keep those in the
Rubric. Yeah.
In the rubric. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so. That could be a, you know, ultimately, I think we're going to present a document to the board, and they
right.
say yes or no to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, Kathy. I think that seems reasonable. All right. So the next discussion is our future meeting, and Robin, if we stuck with our current time frame, let's see, it would be May 2nd, I think, right?
Legislative is meeting May 2nd at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a board meeting on the 3rd. Academics is meeting on the 4th at 5.
Up to you guys.
What would be, how about the next Monday, the May 9th?
May 9th, then you would have agenda setting at 4 o'clock. I mean, agenda setting's at 5 o'clock on the 9th.
What time was on the 4th? What is the meeting, and at what time?
Academics is at 5 o'clock on the 4th.
I could do 3 o'clock on the 4th.
I'm open.
Yeah, that works for me. Let me just, May 4th at 3 o'clock. Okay.
Okay.
How about for you, Daniel? That's a Wednesday?
Yep. May 4th works.
Okay.
Is that a Warrior Star Wars stuff day?
Yes, it is.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We
So,
need,
our next meeting will be on Wednesday, May 4th at 3 p.m. And I will, I'd love to be in person, if that is the committee's desire.
That's fine. 'Cause
okay.
All right.
the legislative meeting is in person, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, well, yeah,
You're gonna be in person at that one too?
I'll be in
right?
person at the district.
Okay, I'll just go.
Okay.
All right, that's fine.
So, I think we have quite a bit for the agenda already with what we've brought forward from this meeting. Do Kathy or Mel have anything else they think we should include in that meeting?
No, I think
No.
just to follow up on the things we talked about today.
Okay. And
I anticipate that we're gonna go from that set of information and move in one direction or another.
exactly. Okay. Daniel, do you have anything you'd like to comment at the end here? No. Okay.
No, I'll bring in the 2021 stuff and we'll just see how it shakes out.
Yeah,
Sounds
great.
good. All right. Robin, any other housekeeping business?
I think that's it.
All right. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
All right. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Thank
Thank
you.
you.